They called her too wild, too hard, too much. 3 men tried to marry her. 3 sent her back before the ink was even dry. But Lenora Graves didn't come west to be anyone's bride. She came to forget, to survive. She came with scars of her own and hands that knew how to fight. Then came Jesse Morgan, a rancher with a healer's touch, and wounds he never spoke of. He offered her a name, a roof, nothing more. But what they found together wasn't comfort, it was fire. This is the story of a woman too fierce for the frontier, and the man who saw the battle in her eyes and stayed. Montana Territory, 1888. The winds howled across the plains like ghosts chasing memory, and Lenora Graves had more ghosts than most. She stepped off the coach in Bitterhorn Ridge with nothing but a battered trunk, a flintlock dagger tied to her boot, and the mail-order bride had clipped from the St. Louis Herald crumpled in her pocket. She wasn't the kind of woman these towns were used to. Her shoulders were too broad from years carrying a rifle. Her hands bore calluses, not from sewing or bread making, but from pulling injured men out of battlefield mud. Her eyes, gray as winter sky, didn't flinch when stared at, and that unsettled people more than any gun. The man who'd placed the ad, Albert Winton, a storekeeper with thinning hair and a respectable mustache, took one look at her and lost color. I didn't expect someone so tall, he muttered. Lenora smiled tightly. She'd been told that before. Albert tried to be polite, offered her a room at the boarding house until they could talk things through. But the next morning she found a note slipped under her door. This won't work. You deserve someone more suited to your experiences. That made 3. 3 towns, 3 suitors, 3 rejections. Mrs. Crenshaw, the boarding house keeper, watched Lenora pack up with something like pity. You're a brave girl, Miss Graves, but men out here don't want brave. They want soft. Lenora buckled her trunk shut. Then they shouldn't send for women they haven't earned. By the week's end, she was on another wagon to another nowhere town, the wind biting her cheeks raw. She was done pretending to be smaller than she was. That was when she met Jesse Morgan. He wasn't like the others. For one, he didn't flinch when she walked into the room. Didn't stare at her scarred forearms or the way she walked like a soldier still listening for gunfire. He simply tipped his hat and said, "Name's Jesse. You're the one Crenshaw wrote me about." "I am," she said, studying him. He was lean, weathered from long winters and too many surgeries done in makeshift tents during the war. His hands were scarred from holding blades that didn't always save lives. There was a stillness in him, the kind that came from having seen too much. "I'm not looking for someone to rescue," Jesse said plainly. "I'm looking for someone who won't flinch when things get ugly. My land's wild, my barn needs fixing, and I don't make promises I can't keep." Lenora crossed her arms. "I don't need rescuing." "Good," he said, and extended his hand. They shook on it. No romance, no fancy words. Just 2 scarred souls making a deal. He offered her a marriage of convenience, but Lenora didn't yet know that what he'd really offered was the one thing she hadn't dared to hope for in years: peace. Jesse Morgan's ranch sat in the crook of a wind-carved valley, hemmed in by cottonwoods and silence. Lenora had expected something more broken down, more desperate, but the place was orderly, even if spare. Fences mended with care, tools hung where they belonged, livestock lean but well-fed. "I run things with what I've got," Jesse said as they rode in. "A few hands, some grit, no time for decor." Inside the house, everything bore the mark of a man who lived alone. Clean, functional, and utterly devoid of softness. Lenora didn't mind. She preferred it that way. Too much lace made her nervous. They married the next morning, quietly, without fanfare. The pastor spoke the words and Lenora nodded, feeling nothing but the solid ground under her boots. Jessie slipped a simple band on her finger. She offered no vows beyond her word. Neither of them smiled. It suited them. That first week, they lived like neighbors with a shared wall. Jessie gave her space and clear expectations. "You manage the house, you eat at my table, and if someone comes looking for trouble, we handle it as one." He didn't touch her, not out of coldness, but out of some unspoken reverence, as if he understood how much it cost her to even be seen. Lenora worked the way she always had, like survival depended on it. She scrubbed the floors, fixed the broken hinge on the back door, stitched new curtains from an old tarp, and took stock of their food stores. She even made stew, twice. Jesse noticed, but he said little. He was a man of quiet rituals. Each morning he fed the horses before breakfast. At dusk he sat on the porch with a mug of chicory coffee and stared at the horizon like he expected something or someone to ride in. Lenora didn't ask what he was waiting for. She just sat beside him one evening, silent and still. "You were a soldier," he said, not asking. "I was a battlefield medic," she replied. "Vicksburg, then Missouri, then worse." He nodded. "I saw your hands. The way you move. You're not scared of blood." "No." He sipped his coffee. "I used to be a surgeon, civilian, until they ran out of uniforms and gave me a blade." That explained the smoothness of his movements, the way he wrapped a rope or cut a piece of leather, deliberate, almost delicate. "What happened after?" "I stopped fixing people who didn't want to be saved." Silence again. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was earned. Jesse didn't ask for her story. She didn't offer it. But the way he looked at her, as if the worst parts of her didn't need hiding, made something loosen in her chest. For the first time since the war, Lenora didn't feel like she had to apologize for surviving. But the world beyond their porch didn't forget. By the end of that week, someone came riding up the road, a man in a long coat, one eye gone, a badge tucked just under his belt, but no warmth in his greeting. Pinkerton, and he didn't come with congratulations. He came with a name and a warning. "I don't know what you've done with her, Mr. Morgan," the agent said, glancing toward Lenora, "but she was declared dead outside St. Louis 3 winters ago, and some men back east think she knows too much." Jesse didn't flinch. He only stepped forward, blocking Lenora from the wind, and from whatever past was galloping fast behind her. "This is my wife," Jesse said calmly, "and anyone who wants to take her better bring more than threats." Lenora didn't speak, but for the first time in years, someone had stepped in front of her instead of leaving her behind, and that changed everything. Lenora stood at the window as the dust from the Pinkerton agent's horse settled into the dry soil of the valley. Jesse hadn't said a word since the man rode off, just walked into the barn and stayed there until long past dark. She knew better than to chase him, but she also knew that no one ran from their past forever, and now hers was knocking, again. That night she laid a fire and waited. Jesse came in cold and quiet. He took off his coat, boots, gloves. Then finally he looked at her. "Who did you run from?" Lenora sat straight. "A man named Royce Harlan. He led a company that wasn't supposed to exist. Said he was Union, but we never got orders. Only bodies. He called it a ghost division. We raided towns too poor to fight back. I was assigned as medic." Jesse didn't interrupt. His hands curled loosely on the table. "I tried to leave. Twice. The second time I got shot in the shoulder and dumped near a frozen creek. A freedman found me, helped me get to a church-run clinic. I healed, changed my name. But Harlan knows I saw everything, knows I kept records, and he'll keep sending men until he's sure I can't talk." Jesse exhaled, slow and steady. "And the Pinkerton?" "Trying to play both sides," Lenora said bitterly. "Protecting whoever pays most." Jesse nodded, then stood. "Then we plan." It was not a question. The next morning, Jesse drew a map of the property. They went over blind spots, strong vantage points, and fallback locations. Lenora suggested traps. Jesse suggested patience. They worked like soldiers preparing a siege. Because they were. And in that quiet fury of planning, something unspoken bloomed. Not romance, but trust. 3 days passed before the first sign came. A snapped fence post. A missing hen. Jesse checked the prints in the dirt. 3 men, one with a limp. Harlan's kind, sloppy killers, hired to do quiet things loudly. Lenora took up the Winchester. She oiled it twice, checked the sights. Then she cut off the braid she'd worn since she was 16, tied it with black thread, and placed it in a box on the mantel. "No more running," she said aloud. The night fell thick and heavy. The ranch sat in silence. And then, movement. Jesse saw them first. One near the haystack, one circling the barn, one climbing to the porch. Lenora moved like wind through the dark, rifle steady. She and Jesse didn't need words anymore. 3 shots, 3 bodies dropped, one still breathing. Jesse knelt beside the man, who gurgled through blood. "Royce, Harlan's coming. You're both already dead." Jesse wiped the blood from his hands as the man went still. "Then we'll make it costly." By morning, the whole valley smelled like gunpowder and pine. They buried the men by the tree line. No markers, no prayers. Lenora washed her hands in freezing water, scrubbing until her skin turned red. Jesse came to her quietly, held out a tin cup of coffee. "He's still coming," she said. "I know. And we can't hide. I wouldn't ask you to." She looked up at him. "I've never had anyone stay. Not when things got hard." Jesse's voice was low. "I didn't ask for easy. I asked for real." Lenora blinked, and the steam from the coffee rose between them like a fragile veil. In that moment, under Montana's wide and merciless sky, Lenora Graves, the woman deemed too fierce, too broken, felt something strange crack in her chest. Not fear, but the slow, dangerous warmth of hope. It snowed that morning. Light at first, just a dusting, but by noon the whole valley had turned white. Jesse looked up at the sky and said what Lenora was already thinking. "He's close." Royce Harlan wasn't the kind of man to wait for spring. Inside the house, Lenora moved methodically through their supplies: ammunition, bandages, rations. Jesse watched her with quiet intensity. It wasn't just preparation. It was the ritual of someone who'd survived before and planned to survive again. "He knows I won't go quietly," she said, as she tucked a long blade into the back of her boot. "He'll want to make an example." Jesse leaned against the doorframe. "He won't get the chance." They spent the day fortifying the property. Lenora laid traps in the trees. Jesse positioned barrels of snow-packed dirt to block the main road. Walter, their old neighbor from down the hill, rode up with a crate of dynamite and one sentence. "I heard Harlan was coming. Figured you'd need this more than I do." Lenora raised an eyebrow. "You believe in making a statement, I see." Walter grinned. "A loud one." By nightfall, everything was set, and then they waited. That kind of waiting has a sound to it. The creak of the rafters, the low whine of the wind, the way a kettle whistles just before it boils over. Jesse and Lenora sat at the kitchen table side by side. No words left, until Jesse broke the silence. "Do you ever think about what you'd be if the war hadn't happened?" Lenora's eyes didn't move from the window. "A school teacher, probably. I had a voice like a bell back then. Used to read poems to my little sister under the apple tree." Jesse nodded slowly. "I would have raised horses, never seen battle, never picked up a gun, probably would have married someone gentle, someone who baked too much and cried at sad stories." Lenora finally turned to look at him. "Still time for some of that." He gave a small smile. "I don't think I'd change it." She blinked. "Why?" "Because all of it led me here, to this moment, to you." A knock on the door shattered it all. 3 sharp raps, deliberate. Lenora stood first, rifle raised. Jesse opened the door slowly. A man stood there, uniform neat, silver gloves. Not Harlan, but close enough. "Mr. Morgan," he said calmly. "Miss Graves, my boss would like a word." Lenora's eyes narrowed. "You tell Harlan if he wants a word, he can come find me himself." The man smiled politely. "He plans to. He just thought he'd offer a chance to make this less bloody." Jesse stepped forward. "Tell him we're ready." The man nodded once. "He'll be here at dawn." He turned and disappeared into the snow without a sound. The door closed. Lenora leaned back against it, heart pounding. "You scared?" Jesse asked. "No," she said. "I'm awake." They didn't sleep that night, just watched the fire, watched each other. Somewhere between fear and purpose, something fragile had formed. As the first light crept over the valley, they stepped out into the cold. 2 figures against the vast white, waiting for justice, for reckoning, for the ghosts to come home. The first gunshot came just after sunrise. It echoed through the valley like thunder, stirring the crows from the trees and silence from the land. Jesse was already in position behind the reinforced barn wall, rifle trained on the tree line. Lenora crouched low in the loft, watching the southern path through a narrow slit in the boards. 5 of them rode in. Royce Harlan wasn't among them. Not yet. The 5 were scouts, ex-military by the way they moved. Not amateurs, but not careful enough. Lenora fired first. The shot cracked through the morning stillness and dropped one of the riders before the others had dismounted. Chaos erupted. Jesse's rifle roared, sharp and precise. The second man fell into the snow. The rest ducked for cover, returning fire with blind rage. Bullets split wood and shattered glass. Lenora moved like a shadow, descending from the loft and sprinting to the root cellar entrance behind the house. She emerged behind the attackers, flanking them with brutal efficiency. 2 more shots, 2 more bodies, then silence, except for a slow, deliberate set of hoofbeats. Royce Harlan rode into the clearing like a man arriving to a party he was sure he'd win. He wore a black coat over a Confederate cavalry uniform, medals still pinned to his chest like ghosts of old sins. His mustache was trimmed, his gloves pristine, and his rifle rested across his lap like a king's scepter. Lenora stepped into view, her hands at her sides. He dismounted with the grace of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. "Lenora Graves," he said, voice smooth as snake oil. "You never did know when to lie down." She didn't answer. Royce tilted his head toward Jesse. "And this your new man? Heard you had a thing for broken soldiers. Guess we all find comfort in what reflects us." Jesse didn't blink. "I'm not the one hiding behind dead men." Royce chuckled. "You think this is over? This is just the beginning. The railroad wants this land. You've made too much noise. You and your war bride. But I'm going to put the both of you in the ground nice and quiet and call it justice." Lenora finally raised her rifle. "Try." The shot came before he could even lift his weapon. But he was fast. Too fast. Her bullet grazed his shoulder, spinning him, but not dropping him. He rolled, firing blindly. Jesse took a hit to the leg and dropped behind the fence. Lenora charged. No cover, no second shot, just rage. She tackled Royce with the force of years of fury, knocking his rifle free and sending them both into the snow. He punched, she elbowed. He pulled a knife. She bit his wrist until the blade dropped. They rolled, fists and blood and breath in the white silence. Then, her hands around his throat. He choked out, "You'll never be free. They'll always come." Lenora pressed harder, voice steady. "Then I'll keep sending them back in pieces." His eyes widened, then stilled. She rolled off, chest heaving. Jesse limped to her side. "You good?" She looked at him, hands trembling. "No," but she didn't cry. She stood. Together they burned the bodies, not for vengeance, for warning. By the time the sheriff rode up 2 days later, the story was already spreading. A battle-hardened woman and a quiet rancher who stood their ground against the last remnants of war. Justice wasn't served, it was taken. Spring came late to the valley that year. The snow didn't melt so much as surrender, slowly, stubbornly, until patches of earth peeked through like bruises healing after a long fight. Life returned in cautious steps, birdsong in the morning, green shoots near the porch, the river thawing into motion. Inside the house, Lenora sat at the window, sharpening her knife with slow, methodical strokes. Not because she needed to, but because it helped her remember she was still here. She had survived, not just the shootout or Royce or the war behind her, but herself. Jesse entered quietly, limping still, though he'd given up the cane weeks ago. "They posted the new land registry," he said, holding a folded sheet of parchment. "We're clear. Railroad backed off after news got out what happened here." Lenora nodded, not looking up. "Good. They called us heroes. Can you believe that?" She smirked. "No." He sat across from her, setting the paper on the table. "They also offered to buy the land again. Triple the price." She stopped sharpening. Her eyes met his, and he added, "I said no." Outside, the wind shifted. The valley was quiet now, like it had been waiting for this moment all along. "You're not scared anymore," she said softly, not as a question. He shook his head. "Of being alone, I was, but not anymore." They sat in silence, letting that truth hang between them. Lenora reached for a mug of tea gone cold. "I've been thinking of building a forge." Jesse raised an eyebrow. "Going back to smithing?" "Maybe, maybe not. Just something mine, something I shape. He nodded. I'll build you the roof. They smiled. Small things, real things. That night they stood outside as the sun dipped behind the mountains, casting gold over everything it touched. The scars on Jesse's face, the ones he used to hide, caught the light like battle medals. Lenora's hands, calloused and rough, rested against his chest. You don't flinch anymore, she whispered. I don't have to, he said. She looked out over the land, over the fences they'd rebuilt and the graves they'd dug. I was always meant to fight, she murmured, but I never thought I'd fight for peace. And now? She turned to him. Now I think I'd fight to keep it. He kissed her, not with urgency, but with certainty. Later, as the stars blinked open across the sky, Jessie wrapped a blanket around her shoulders and sat beside her on the porch. You ever think, he said quietly, if those men hadn't turned you away, you'd be living a very different life right now? Lenora looked at him with a calm fierceness that had once driven men to fear her. I'd still be fighting, but I wouldn't be free. And that was the truth. Not all battles are fought with guns. Some are fought with trust, some with love, some with the choice to stay when leaving would be easier. And Lenora Graves, the warrior bride no man thought he could handle, had found the only one who never tried to tame her, only to stand beside her, and together they stayed. And so, across these unforgiving lands, another tale drifts away with the wind. If this quiet courage, this stubborn heart touched you in any way, leave a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and pass this story on to someone who needs it. Don't forget to subscribe, because out here there are still so many truths left to tell, each one carved from pain, hope, and dust. This is Wild West Stories. Thank you for watching.